using the basic kameez pattern, and the major points that you will need in making the variation are that you definitely should need the bus point, which is a reference line, the dart, which is at the armhole, the dart measurements of the waist, and also the neckline. These are noted specially because the variation comes at these points. Now using this pattern, you trace it using a tracing wheel onto another sheet of paper and darken it to your convenience. Here I have used a sketch pen. You could also use pencil or use it directly. Now first thing to be noted in the garment is that it is a shorter shoulder. So you will be needing to measure the shoulder and reduce it accordingly. I have used a 2 inch. So let's just mark 2 inches from the shoulder. We'll be using the basic kameez pattern, and the major points that you will need in making the variation are that you definitely should need the bus point, which is a reference line, the dart, which is at the armhole, the dart measurements of the waist, and also the neckline. These are noted specially because the variation comes at these points. Now using this pattern, you trace it using a tracing wheel onto another sheet of paper and darken it to your convenience. Here I have used a sketch pen. You could also use pencil or use it directly. Now first thing to be noted in the garment is that it is a shorter shoulder. So you will be needing to measure the shoulder and reduce it accordingly. I have used a 2 inch. So let's just mark 2 inches from the shoulder. Okay, so from the shoulder point, we'd be measuring 2 inches and leaving a mark there. This would be how wide your neck is. The neck isn't deep, so we'd be using the very same point as we have made in the basic line. Now you could curve it out to create the shape of the neck. You could use your hand or use a French curve instead. A simple curve made with your hand would be more than enough. The next thing you would need to do is to make sure that you get a straight line here, which would make it a separate yoke on top, for which you would be drawing a line through that, which would be your reference line, but you would have to be careful to put it through this dart point. In case you want a specific height of the yoke for the upper yoke that you are using, and you need to take a measurement for that, you can either take the measurement from the waist point till the point that you want to take. Here it is 6 1/4 inches, or you could take it from your underarm point, which is 1 3/4. Now our main idea is to eliminate the darts, and what we'd be doing here is eliminating this dart to a shoulder dart here, for which you will have to cut the pattern separately. You could cut along the new neckline that you have made, which would make things easier, because the excess of paper here is unnecessary and would lead to more confusion. Okay, now use just the yoke and I'll tell you how to transfer the dart. You could simply take a line. Okay. You could simply draw a straight line to this point, making it a shoulder dart, slash it and close the dart. Be careful that there is a little bit of piece of the paper holding the paper together, and then you can fold it. Always make sure that the excess of the fabric that you fold in any dart is towards the lower side. As you close this dart, it would automatically open up. So to avoid this space, you could just slash it fully and stick these two pieces together. Now you would have one full continuous pattern and no darts for you to stitch. Now let's separate the bottom portion of the garment from the upper yoke. I've cut it out, and now what you could do is create as many extra panels as you need. This would help you create more volume if you have more panels, or you could just add on more fabric into a single panel. Here I prefer if you add more panels. Easiest way to eliminate the waste dart would be to make one panel passing through. Make sure it passes through the bust point. Make a full length line till the hemline. Now check where you want to position the rest of your panels. I would be adding one more panel, so I could divide this big panel in the middle. It is a 5.5 inches, so I could keep one side panel which is shorter. Let's just compare this. This is for a 3 inches. So I'd prefer putting a 3-inch panel here and making a smaller side panel. Now you can mark the center point of this and draw a straight line joining the 2 points. You could extend it below to how you desire. It could be either a straight line or could be a slant line. Here I'd be doing a slant line, a slightly slant line, trying to get through the visual center of this piece. Now you can cut these panels apart. When you cut the panel which includes the dart, make sure that you eliminate the dart as you cut it. The dart portion remains outside your pattern. That piece could be discarded and the rest of the panels could be used. Now you would have 3 panels to your one side. This would be a centerfold pattern, and therefore it would be easier if you could mark it. It's a non-fold and it is a center front. Now, to make it easier while sewing, it would be better if you have notch marks. In that case, you could always use the waist mark as one of the notch marks. And if you'd also need, you could use the hip line. Okay, any pattern, after cutting it from the basic pattern, you could stick it to a new sheet of paper using sellotape or any convenient adhesive. Sellotape would be a lot more convenient because you could still remove it and rework if you have done a mistake. Now, for creating the volume at the bottom, the garment has a fit till the waist and then it's flared towards the bottom. So, till the waist, pattern does not have to be altered. You could trace it as it is. In case of beginners, it would be easy to use different colors. So, you could understand at which step you are at or at which step you have changed or altered it. Since the center front is going to be a non-fold pattern, we will not be increasing any volume right in the middle. So, we keep it towards the sides wherever a seam is found. So, from the waistline, you could increase a flare according to your convenience. Let's say from the hip I have a 1 inch and it could be a gradually increasing flare. So, from the waist, I could draw a line through the point and keep increasing it. The same is to be done to all the panels if you add more volume. To reduce the amount of volume, and if you do not need a lot, you could make the angle smaller or larger according to your desire. Making it smaller would make the volume less, making it larger would make the volume higher. However, making smaller would be convenient as you have more panels. Similarly, the yoke has to be stuck to a base, and then to draw the sleeve, if it's a very flimsy fabric, you could just draw a straight line extended from the shoulder. As the name suggests, it's an extended shoulder sleeve, so you could just extend it and make it one with the pattern. Or if you're using a thicker fabric or using a fabric that's fused or using a lining, like in my case I've used cotton silk, you need to give the curve of the arm. So, try to get an estimated curve of the arm or use a French curve and draw a curve. Now, what is the length of the sleeve that you desire? Accordingly, measure it and stop it at that point. Here the sleeve is about 6 1/4 inches. Now, to join this, you could draw just a straight line, it's as simple, and try blending it to the side seam. Do not make it as fitted as the basic pattern because an extended shoulder sleeve does not come with an armhole stitching, which means you will not have much of an ease to move your hand around if you don't have an ease. So, in that case, you add an extra ease here. Trace the entire pattern onto the base fabric, onto the base paper. And your yoke is done. The measurement of the sleeve curve, make sure you note it down so you could use it for the back yoke as well. Similarly, trace the back pattern and you can cut it into a separate piece. Now, you need a back yoke as well, for which we'd again draw a line. Here for the reference line, I've used the across underarm line, that line, and I've curved it out into the armhole. There is no dart at the yoke for you to remove, so you can leave it as it is. To match the shoulder of the front, which is 2 inches, you can always add 2 inches here. If you want to reduce the back neckline, you could, but for this style, you could just keep it the straight. You could cut the panels separately. Before that, the bottom panels, you could decide how many you want. If you want it similar to the front, you could make this 3 or 2 as convenient. I'd make it 3 here. And you could cut on all the panels separately. Any piece of the earlier draft that is not being used to the next draft could just be discarded. As I said earlier, as you cut, make sure you eliminate the darts. For the panels at the bottom, as said priorly, you could always use the waistline mark as your notch marks. These, as you did in the front pattern, you could place onto a piece of fabric, onto a piece of base, attach both the sides, and then you could extend as you desire. I'm giving small extensions towards the back. This is completely up to your choice. That would be one panel. Now for the back here, back separate cutting. Okay. Now for the back, you would have the mark of the first side panel that you made. So to get the big opening that you see in the garment, you could always draw a straight line, a curved line or a straight line joining these 2 points, and then this could be removed. attach the yoke piece onto the base. Now for the sleeve, it's the exact same step as you did in the front. You extend the shoulder in a straight line. If it's a light fabric and if you want to fall like that, or you could give it a curve. Now the curve that you're giving has to match with the curve of the front. So the measurement was 6 1/4 in front. So you could always give 6 1/4 at the back as well. That's where your 6 1/4 is. Mark the point. Join these. Using a straight line. Here it is at the very tip of the end of the armhole, so you do not have to give an extra ease. While stitching, just be careful that you stitch till this point and leave so much for the sleeve. Let's say about 1/2 inch. Now for the seam allowances for the different parts, different components of the garment, the shoulder part, as it's a continuous line from the neck to the shoulder tip as well as to the sleeve end, you could always just give 1/2 inch. Measure 1/2 inch along the line. And connect the points to give your seam allowance. As you can understand, this is where your stitch would be, and this is the extra seam allowance, where you could use it to overlock or to give different seam finishes like a French seam, mock seam, etc. The sleeve and the yoke attachment is similarly 1/2 inch as well. Everywhere throughout the patterns, you could preferably give 1/2 inch to control over the whole seam allowance and not have a confusion while sewing. As for the panels, for the center back, you do have a seam where you add a concealed zipper, or for the center front where you do not have a zipper or a seam in between, you could just leave it as it is. Otherwise, everywhere there is a seam, as I told before, you could give 1/2 inch. Adding more seam elements would give a bulk to all the seams that you make, or adding less would leave a little bit of a risk. Generally, a 1/2 inch seam allowance is given for a safety side, where if something goes wrong while stitching, you still have an excess of 1/2 inch to manipulate the garment. In case of the center back where there is a seam opening, which is for the zipper, you could give 1/2 inch. This is the same for both the lining and the shell fabric, as well as for all the front, back, yoke and panels. Do not worry about the hemlines of all the panels because they are cut after you put it onto a form. As I mentioned before, the garment is a high-low garment, and so the hemline is a curved hemline. So you could easily not do it in the pattern. Instead, leave the hemline long and then put it onto a form or to yourself, or preferably another person, and then measure the hemline from the bottom. Keep a scale at the roof, at the ground, keep an L scale, and then measure from the toe to the point that you want to cut it. This would help you to give an equal line all throughout the garment. Everything else is the same. Okay. The done draft is actualized using a normal cotton silk, green fabric and printed jute fabric, and for the lining we've used cotton for both the green as well as for the printed jute. Now here you can notice that the neck is a boat neck and how the center front does not come with any seams. While stitching, make sure you stitch the shoulder in a curve, though it might not look as much deeper curve. When you wear it, you realize it's not a straight line and it falls according to the curve of your shoulder. Other things to be noticed are that all joints are to meet perfectly, and then towards the back. The back of the garment, the opening. Make sure that it slides exactly with the panel in between, the seam line there. And for the buttoning on top, I've used a loop technique, what you gently see in looping of belt buttons or trouser belts. And I've used a normal wooden button. Make sure when you make the loop, it is just a little above the size of the button so that it goes in but stays tight. Now for the zipper, it's a concealed zipper. You should always be careful that the zipper ends a little below the waistline because that will be the smallest area, the smallest circumference, and that has to go in. So you have to be sure that the opening crosses the waistline. Okay. Now for the inside out view of the entire garment. As you notice, the lining and the shell is stitched and turned inside along the neckline and along the cut open in the middle. Everywhere else it is overlocked at the shoulder as well. You could also overlock the sleeve, fold it and do a blind hem. The buttoning is done on the right side, leaving just a small knot onto the wrong side. The zipper does not come with an extra flap. It's a simple concealed zipper, making it easier. The overlock portion here, which does not come with a specific finish, to keep it inside the garment rather from popping out outside, you could just give a small hand tack instead of a top seam. Avoid as many top seams as possible on a printed jute because it tends to fray higher. All panels are attached by a single stitch, pressed open and ironed. Ironing it as soon as each seam is done is important so that the garment lies flat and does not look bulky along the seams. You can notice, if you want, you could also add a press button instead of the buttons and avoid using a loop. You could also use buttonhole or the general blouse hook and eye. this is the front bottom view of the garment, and as you can see, since it's a high-low, you could see the back of the garment from front. So the seams along the panels, the ends of the panels is extremely neat, and this finish where the lining is seen and these add as extra, look like extra pipings, would be a different effect altogether to the garment. Make sure that all the seams are neat and clean because they are visible even from front, though they are inside. For the hem, it's a 1/2 inch fold and folded again to give a single stitch. Only one top stitch is seen. All throughout the garment, only one top stitch along the hemline would be seen, and everything else is either stitch and turned, pressed open or hand tacked.